Well, I'm delighted to be joined today at ARM Studios with Tay Salimullah, Vice President, Head of Global Value and Access at Novartis Gene Therapies. Tay, welcome to ARM Studios.
Thanks, Tim, for having us.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You joined me on a panel on the importance of ethics in cell and gene therapy. Maybe you could just take a moment to say, in your view, why are ethics important? What did you say on the panel, and what did you hear on the panel?
Thanks, Tim. So firstly, thanks, Tim, for introducing a bold topic. I think we started to take the lid off this topic. A lot of people talk about it. It's an inner dialogue that goes on, and all the way from kind of sticker shock of gene and cell therapies and everything else, we're held up against. I think it was the right timing as we move into prevalent pools of patients in hemophilia, in diabetes, and sickle cell, to really take this head on and open the discussion and debate. For me, ethics fundamentally, whether I was working in cell therapy or gene therapy, has not changed, which is how do you mobilize a group or an organization to democratize access worldwide? And that means there's fundamental questions you have to ask yourself at the real design stage, or even when you're seeding a company. Am I going to go alone, or am I going to partner? And can I go alone fast, or can I go further together? And what I've learned is if you're really going to take on a bold, ambitious topic like democratizing access, not only in the United States and Europe, but beyond, you have to ask yourself those tough questions really on what parts of the playbook are you going to reinvent? Are there parts of the old pharma model that you have to dismantle? For example, the launch sequence, are you going to follow that traditionally or in a non-traditional way? And in areas such as spinal muscular atrophy, sickle cell disease, DMD, where time is of the essence, frankly, it's too long for patients to wait.
Yeah, definitely in our space, in the rare disease space, I always say, time is life. For too many of our patients, the status quo represents death or serious disability. So I couldn't agree more.
And almost, Tim, it's like a diagnostic odyssey. Not only getting treatment, but spending years trying to navigate the system. So is there a center that can actually treat my child, and can I get diagnosed? So even fundamentally, that in itself should be a wake-up call on these patients have already, burnt so much time and energy and days and years trying to access care. What I really liked about what I heard is, firstly, the construct of the panel from investment banking, a former ARM president, CEO, industry, and a profound professor in ethics.
Bioethicist, patients.
Yep. I thought it was amazing. And I think what that really, for me, there were a couple of highlights. Number one, that we're starting to uncover and ask the questions that are going on in the inner dialogue of people, like fundamentally human biology, the gene therapy that's going to change the genomics of a patient. Number two, how do you think about organizations which are like patient-even organizations who are actually taking on, I would say, sovereign leadership on their own to create funds, to say, if we're not going to see a sense of leadership from governments, payers, we're going to take this on ourselves. And I think what that is good in one way, it produces innovation. What it's not good in another way is, can you then scale and make that happen? And I think what I feel really good about is where companies like Novartis take a bold move to invest into gene therapy, to cell therapy, we hopefully can see a world where we can scale that, not only have it for the few, but for the many around the world.
Right. Well, you guys are at Novartis are clearly one of the true global leaders in innovation for gene therapy and cell therapy. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Zolgensma. It's one of the things we talked about on the panel, which has been a huge success story, and you've been able to find a way to ensure it's available in something like 45, 50 countries. It's really remarkable. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, happy to. Sometimes Zolgensma and the word unicorn go together. I'm trying to now dismantle that a little bit because I don't think that's the right thing for a plethora of gene therapies and cell therapies to come. So just a very quick sort of fact check. We had to go, state by state, plan by plan, government payer by government Medicare payer, and really graft out policies and do that hard grafting. In heterogeneous environments in Europe, we had to offer things like day one access in the Netherlands, where we would say, we'll give you 10 kits, and if we don't reach an agreement, then we'll consume that risk. But it really allowed us to converge with the healthcare system in a mature way, not abuse that vulnerability, but come to the party with a really, I would say, mature understanding. What that's led to really is we have now 51 approvals around the world. Some of them have come in less than 3 years of a US FDA approval in markets we would never imagine in former roles like Egypt, Brazil, Ecuador, Chile. And we have access pathways in 40 of those and 3,500 patients, babies that have been treated. But honestly, the secret sauce is in the people. And I refer it to my function around 5 Ps. Can you assemble a playground of puzzle solvers who are privileged with humility to serve with purpose to find patients? Because frankly, I didn't go to a gene therapy school. I didn't go to a gene therapy academy, but I knew that if we were able to assemble people who are driven by purpose and who have a sense of imposed responsibility, we will find a way. And that really, I think, is what this industry, we should continue to talk about. You mentioned, what did I hear on the panel? You talked about diversity. I think the more we can surround ourselves in this sector around people who can help us dismantle our bias, our high science, and then translate that into access and real care, I think that is absolutely the right way to go for this industry and this sector.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you. And Zolgensma has just been a huge global success. I know you guys aren't done. You're just getting going in some ways, but you've made tremendous progress. So congratulations
on
that.
I also just state and mention that the learnings have now allowed us to do our phase 3 trial in countries such as India, China, Brazil, where the FDA asked us to do a placebo sham control, a story for another day. But we're now doing that trial and bringing gene therapy phase 3 trials to countries which never would have imagined doing a gene therapy trial.
Let's switch gears a little bit to sickle cell disease. We anticipate the approval, there's a PDUFA date coming up for both the Vertex and CRISPR Therapeutics sickle cell gene editing regimen and the Bluebird gene editing regimen in December this year. So sickle cell will certainly be gaining quite a bit of prominence, I'm sure. If you could maybe say a few minutes about the Novartis sickle cell program. It's an allogeneic sickle cell program with a partnership with the Gates Foundation. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about that so our viewers understand it.
Yeah, sure. Tim, thanks a lot. It's a topic which is really dear to my heart for many reasons. I was part of a team that incubated and I led the Novartis flagship sickle cell program. And before I pivot to the in vivo Gates partnership, it really starts with deeply understanding what patients, caregivers go through on a daily basis with this disease, this deadly stooge, I would say, of the past. And in countries such as Ghana, where 80% of the population in Africa for sickle cell disease is affected by, diagnostics are critical. Centers of excellence, infrastructure, having even the basic access to standard of care powder hydroxyurea, which is about 50 years old. People can't get accessibility and affordability to that. And why is that so critical? Is what is the point of having a gene therapy when you haven't preserved the organs with the standard of care that you really need? So that really humbled us. It taught us a lot in real time, on the ground, boots on the battlefield around what does it need to do from a systemic level before these reality of gene therapies come from Bluebird and companies like Vertex, which I'm really excited about. So we look forward to that reality of those approvals. What we're also excited about is that work then led to a propel in our partnership with esteemed organizations like Gates and the World Bank to say, frankly, Novartis can't solve this one. And that point when I said we have to partner on that space, because
well, that goes to your, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far,
that's
go
it.
Together. Yeah.
And otherwise, we would have probably just been a US kind of based organization. But Gates recognized that from all their work with vaccines, HIV, where often patients are labeled as death from HIV, but underlying they had the sickle cell SS gene, which was effective, which actually was the underlying cause of the death and the mortality. So that partnership, I think, will now hopefully make its way to the clinic to discover, develop medicines, but most importantly, find new ways to look at what we need, so we don't need a whole infrastructure and a resource behind it, but we can, at site of care, give that to the patients. And why Gates is critical for that is they have a huge track record of, that vaccine-based approach. So it just felt, the right thing to do. We're a company with Novartis' global scale, but recognizing that we won't be able to solve this one on our own. that we should, and we're open for other partners to come into this.
Yeah, that's terrific. Maybe one final question, just stepping way back, at a high level, why do you do what you do? Why do you love doing what you do every day? You can see your enthusiasm for your work, but just tell us a little bit more about what motivates you.
So on the fortunate side, I have a huge sort of, I would say, siblings that were grandkids, and nobody's been directly affected by a rare disease. However, it goes back to a story for me where I was professionally isolated in 2009, working on a Boston School of Public Health, sponsored by Pfizer, in Malawi, where I witnessed 250 doctors, 14 million people, and 1 in 50,000, one doctor to 50,000, and people walk 3 hours to go and get antiretrovirals. And at that point, I realized I'm in pharma and I've arrived my Pfizer brain. Medicines is only, and access is one part. This is a whole system out there that needs kind of thinking. And I realized that 10 hours on a plane in the UK where I was at the time, I don't have these questions, I don't have these issues. And life expectancy is above 60, and I'm dealing with a population with life expectancy 37. So I've always kind of tried over the last 2 decades where pharma, I would say, have had the good days of riding off into the sunset and doing great things. I've always felt we've under-indexed on access. And I felt it's a compelling responsibility that not only do we develop translational science, but we need to plug in translational access at the early stages and almost have difficult conversations within companies on how we go about not only discovering them, but making them accessible and finding new ways. So our work remains undone, and I look forward to ARM sponsoring even more access initiatives and more of your leadership, Tim, to bring some of these topics to the surface.
All right, well, great. Well, listen, thanks to Novartis for being such an important member of ARM. Thanks to you for your leadership. And thank you for joining us here at ARM Studios.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.